Every 63 minutes, a completed 4-engine bomber leaves the end of an American assembly line in southeastern Michigan. The aircraft consists of approximately 1.5 million individual parts. The figure is taken from a translated American industrial publication dated October 1943. The production interval is recorded in the same document. German economic intelligence summaries list the plant as Willow Run. The floor area exceeds several million square feet. The roof spans uninterrupted distances measured in hundreds of meters. Rail lines enter the building. Aircraft engines arrive pre-tested. Wing sections arrive fully assembled. Fuselage segments are aligned, riveted, wired, and sealed in sequence. Inspection stations are placed at fixed intervals. The line does not stop. Monthly tables compiled in Berlin show serial numbers assigned faster than earlier estimates allow. Shipping data from neutral ports indicates sustained outbound movement. Aluminum deliveries match the reported rhythm. Workforce figures rise, then stabilize. The part count remains unchanged across multiple sources. The same number appears again. 63 minutes. Not an objective. Not a forecast. Recorded as an observed interval under operating conditions. Earlier German estimates for bomber assembly list timelines measured in weeks. The discrepancy is noted in margins. No correction follows. No alternate figure replaces it. The file remains active. New clippings repeat the number. Clerks underline it. Tally marks accumulate beside the same line. In the late 1930s and early 1940s, industrial data collected by German military and economic intelligence services increasingly included references to manufacturing activity in the United States that exceeded earlier estimates. Reports compiled by the Abwehr, by economic sections of the Wehrmacht High Command, and by German commercial observers stationed abroad recorded developments in American aviation production that required continuous revision of pre-war assumptions. Among the firms monitored with particular attention was the Ford Motor Company, whose facilities, labor organization, and output figures were repeatedly noted in memoranda circulated within German intelligence channels. By 1940, Ford Motor Company had been identified in German files not only as an automobile manufacturer but as an industrial enterprise capable of rapid conversion to aircraft production. Prior to the formal entry of the United States into the war, German analysts collected open-source material, trade publications, patent filings, and observations from neutral intermediaries concerning Ford's machine tooling, assembly line practices, and labor discipline. Reports noted that Ford's existing plants employed conveyor-based production systems, subdivided tasks into narrowly defined operations, and relied on standardized components produced at scale. These observations were logged without speculation, forming part of routine industrial intelligence summaries distributed to military procurement offices. In early 1941, German economic intelligence summaries referenced American government contracts with private manufacturers for aircraft production. The Consolidated Aircraft Corporation's B-24 Liberator bomber was listed among aircraft types ordered in large numbers. Subsequent documents recorded that Ford Motor Company had received authorization to construct a dedicated plant for B-24 production near Ypsilanti, Michigan. The site, later identified in reports as Willow Run, was described in technical terms, including land area, proximity to rail lines, and access to electrical power. Intelligence assessments tracked the progress of construction through aerial photographs obtained indirectly and through commercial satellite imagery descriptions acquired from neutral aviation publications. Construction reports from mid-1941 detailed that the Willow Run plant was being erected using reinforced concrete and steel framing, with roof spans exceeding those typical of automobile factories. German observers noted that the building layout appeared optimized for linear flow rather than batch assembly. Documents filed by German attaches in neutral countries referenced American press releases describing the plant as a single continuous assembly line extending more than a mile in length. These references were transcribed into intelligence digests without commentary. By late 1941, as the United States formally entered the war, German intelligence reporting on American industrial capacity intensified. New directives from Berlin instructed collection agencies to prioritize information on aircraft production rates, workforce size, subcontractor networks, and component standardization. Ford Motor Company was designated a priority target for industrial intelligence collection due to its scale and reputation for production efficiency. In early 1942, reports compiled from shipping manifests, labor statistics, and American government announcements indicated that Ford had begun tooling the Willow Run facility for bomber production. German intelligence summaries listed the number of machine tools installed, including milling machines, presses, and riveting equipment. Observers noted the delivery of specialized jigs and fixtures designed for airframe assembly. These details were collated into technical annexes circulated among German procurement planners. German intelligence analysts recorded that the B-24 bomber consisted of approximately 1.5 million individual parts, including structural components, fasteners, electrical wiring, hydraulic systems, and armament fittings. This figure appeared in multiple reports, derived from American technical manuals and procurement documents. The complexity of assembling such an aircraft was noted in descriptive terms, with enumerations of subsystems and production stages, without evaluative language. By mid-1942, reports from German agents operating in neutral countries cited American press statements indicating that Ford aimed to produce bombers at an unprecedented rate. Initial production figures recorded low output, with assembly times measured in days rather than hours. German intelligence summaries tracked these figures month by month, noting incremental reductions in assembly time as workforce training progressed and supply chains stabilized. Documents dated late 1942 recorded that Ford's workforce at Willow Run had expanded to tens of thousands of employees, including skilled machinists, semi-skilled assemblers, and administrative staff. Reports listed workforce composition by gender and age, reflecting American labor mobilization practices. German intelligence noted the establishment of training programs to standardize assembly procedures and reduce variation. These observations were filed as factual entries in labor and production reports. Throughout 1943, German intelligence agencies continued to monitor production data related to Willow Run. Reports referenced American government publications stating monthly output targets and achieved figures. Internal German summaries noted that production delays had occurred due to design changes, supply shortages, and quality control issues. These issues were recorded in chronological order, based on available documentation, without inference regarding long-term outcomes. By mid-1943, intelligence reports recorded a significant increase in output at Willow Run. Documents cited American sources stating that assembly time per aircraft had been reduced substantially. German analysts compiled tables showing reductions in labor hours per bomber and increases in daily production rates. These tables were appended to intelligence briefs circulated among Luftwaffe logistics planners. In the autumn of 1943, multiple German intelligence reports independently recorded claims that Ford's Willow Run plant had achieved an assembly interval approaching one completed B-24 bomber per hour. One report, dated October 1943, cited an American industrial journal stating that under optimal conditions, an aircraft left the final assembly line approximately every 63 minutes. This figure was transcribed verbatim into German intelligence summaries and distributed without modification. Subsequent reports sought to verify this figure through cross-referencing additional sources. Shipping records from American ports indicated increased outbound deliveries of completed aircraft. Rail transport schedules showed frequent movement of large aircraft components from subcontractors to Willow Run. German intelligence summaries correlated these logistical data with reported assembly intervals, noting consistency across sources. Technical annexes accompanying these reports described the organizational structure of the Willow Run assembly line. According to compiled descriptions, the production process was divided into sequential stations, each responsible for a specific set of tasks. Components arrived prefabricated and pre-inspected from a network of subcontractors distributed across the United States. German intelligence documents listed categories of suppliers, including aluminum producers, engine manufacturers, and electronics firms, with estimated delivery volumes. Reports also detailed quality control procedures observed or inferred from American documentation. Inspection stations were noted at multiple points along the assembly line. German intelligence summaries included descriptions of standardized measurement tools, tolerance specifications, and documentation protocols used to track compliance. These descriptions were included as factual accounts of observed practices. By early 1944, intelligence reports from multiple German agencies referenced the 63-minute assembly interval as an established figure in American industrial reporting. Documents circulated within the German High Command included statistical tables listing estimated annual output from Willow Run based on this interval. These tables were presented as calculations derived from reported data, without commentary. German intelligence also recorded information on workforce shifts and operating schedules. Reports indicated that Willow Run operated around the clock, with multiple shifts per day. Energy consumption figures were cited, based on American utility reports, indicating high electrical load consistent with continuous operation. These figures were incorporated into assessments of industrial activity levels. In parallel, German intelligence monitored American public communications regarding aircraft production. Press releases, speeches by American officials, and factory tour descriptions were collected and translated. References to Ford's production achievements were extracted and summarized. Intelligence analysts noted the use of standardized language across multiple sources, suggesting coordinated information dissemination. These observations were recorded without further elaboration. Reports also included descriptions of physical plant dimensions. The Willow Run facility was described as covering several million square feet, with internal transport systems including conveyors and overhead cranes. German intelligence documents listed measurements and capacities as reported in American engineering publications. These technical details were compiled into reference files. Throughout this period, German intelligence agencies maintained files on Ford Motor Company's leadership and management structure. Names of executives, plant managers, and production engineers were listed, along with their professional backgrounds. These entries were factual, derived from publicly available information, and updated as personnel changes occurred. German intelligence summaries also recorded American government oversight of aircraft production. References were made to the War Production Board and to inspection teams assigned to Willow Run. Reports listed regulatory requirements and reporting obligations imposed on the plant. These details were included to contextualize production data. By mid-1944, German intelligence reports continued to cite the 63-minute assembly interval as part of routine production statistics. No revisions to this figure were recorded in available summaries during this period. Reports focused on tracking output volume, delivery schedules, and deployment of completed aircraft to operational units. Throughout all reporting, German intelligence documents maintained a consistent format, presenting data in chronological order with source citations where available. Language remained descriptive and procedural, reflecting the conventions of military intelligence reporting. Observations regarding Ford's production methods, workforce organization, and output rates were recorded as discrete entries, without evaluative statements or interpretive conclusions. As the war continued, intelligence collection on American industrial production persisted, with Ford Motor Company remaining a recurring subject in reports. The Willow Run plant's reported ability to produce a complex bomber aircraft at intervals measured in minutes was documented alongside other industrial data, forming part of the broader body of wartime intelligence records maintained by German agencies during this period. By late 1944, German intelligence services continued to compile operational summaries concerning American aircraft production, with particular attention to the Ford Motor Company and the Willow Run facility. Reports generated during this period relied on accumulated documentation, intercepted commercial data, neutral press coverage, and indirect logistical indicators. The structure of these reports remained consistent with earlier formats, presenting sequences of observations organized by date and source. Intelligence files from this phase recorded that Willow Run had reached a stabilized production rhythm. German analysts noted that assembly intervals were maintained through standardized scheduling and fixed shift rotations. Reports detailed that each production shift was structured to overlap with the next, minimizing downtime between stages of assembly. These observations were drawn from American labor publications and translated factory schedules obtained through neutral intermediaries. Documents compiled in November 1944 listed the number of B-24 bombers completed per day at Willow Run, based on reported figures from American government releases. These numbers were cross-referenced with aircraft serial numbers observed in overseas deployment records. German intelligence summaries included tables correlating serial number ranges with estimated production dates. These tables were presented as technical correlations, without narrative explanation. Reports also described the internal logistics of the Willow Run facility. German intelligence analysts recorded that completed aircraft moved from final assembly to flight test areas located adjacent to the main production hall. Descriptions included runway length, hangar capacity, and the presence of dedicated test crews. These details were sourced from aerial imagery descriptions published in neutral aviation journals and from American press photographs. German intelligence documentation further noted the integration of engine installation into the main assembly flow. The B-24's engines, supplied by external manufacturers, were delivered to Willow Run in pre-tested condition. Reports described the sequence by which engines were mounted, connected to fuel and electrical systems, and inspected. These procedural descriptions were extracted from American technical manuals and training films referenced in industrial periodicals. In addition to airframe assembly, reports recorded information on armament installation. Intelligence summaries listed the types of defensive weapons fitted to the B-24 and the stages at which these were installed along the assembly line. German analysts noted that some armament components were installed late in the process to allow flexibility in configuration. These observations were documented without inference regarding tactical implications. By December 1944, German intelligence reports included references to workforce attrition and replacement at Willow Run. Labor statistics cited in reports indicated turnover rates and recruitment figures. These data were drawn from American Labor Board reports and union publications. Intelligence summaries listed categories of training programs used to integrate new workers into the assembly process, including standardized instruction modules and supervised practice stations. German intelligence files also contained information on material supply flows. Reports listed monthly tonnage of aluminum alloy delivered to Willow Run, based on shipping data from American rail and port authorities. Analysts recorded fluctuations in delivery schedules attributed to weather conditions and transport congestion. These entries were factual records of observed variations. Throughout early 1945, German intelligence continued to receive fragmented reports on American aircraft production despite increasing constraints on collection capabilities. Documents from January 1945 noted that Ford maintained continuous output at Willow Run. The 63-minute assembly interval continued to appear in summaries, often cited as a benchmark figure in American industrial reporting. Some reports referenced visits by American officials and foreign observers to the Willow Run plant. German intelligence summaries listed dates and names of visiting delegations as reported in American newspapers. These entries noted the presence of guided tours and publicized demonstrations of assembly line operations. The reports did not include descriptions beyond those present in source materials. Technical annexes compiled during this period included diagrams reproduced from American engineering publications. These diagrams illustrated assembly line layouts, conveyor paths, and workstation spacing. German intelligence analysts annotated these diagrams with measurements and throughput estimates derived from reported data. These materials were filed as reference documents. German intelligence also monitored changes in aircraft design affecting production. Reports from early 1945 noted modifications to the B-24 airframe and systems. These modifications were described in terms of additional components or altered installation procedures. Analysts recorded the dates on which these changes were reported to have been implemented at Willow Run. In parallel, German intelligence maintained records on subcontractor networks supporting Ford's production. Files listed companies supplying major assemblies such as wings, fuselage sections, and control surfaces. Reports included estimated output rates of these subcontractors based on American industrial data. These lists were periodically updated as suppliers changed or expanded capacity. As Allied bombing intensified in Europe, German intelligence reports increasingly focused on domestic industrial challenges. Nevertheless, reporting on American production continued where possible. Documents from February 1945 referenced ongoing shipment of completed aircraft from Willow Run to operational theaters. These shipments were identified through transport records and deployment announcements. German intelligence summaries also included information on production costs where available. Reports cited American budget documents indicating cost per aircraft at various stages of production. These figures were recorded alongside output rates, forming part of broader economic intelligence compilations. Throughout this period, the language of German intelligence reports remained formal and procedural. Entries were structured to present data points, source references, and dates. No evaluative adjectives or interpretive statements were included. The focus remained on recording observed or reported facts. By March 1945, intelligence reports became less frequent and more fragmented. Nevertheless, available documents continued to reference Willow Run's output figures. The 63-minute assembly interval was still cited in some reports as a representative statistic drawn from American sources. No alternative figures were recorded in the surviving summaries. German intelligence analysts also noted American efforts to document and publicize production methods. Reports referenced instructional films, factory manuals, and press articles describing mass production techniques. These materials were catalogued as part of intelligence reference collections. As the war in Europe approached its final months, German intelligence agencies faced increasing disruption. Some reports from April 1945 referenced incomplete data and gaps in information flow. Despite this, existing files on Ford Motor Company and Willow Run remained intact in intelligence archives. Documents from this period also recorded the reassignment of intelligence personnel and the consolidation of files. Lists of priority industrial targets continued to include Ford, though with reduced frequency of new data entries. Previously compiled reports were recirculated within remaining command structures. The accumulated intelligence records concerning Ford's aircraft production presented a continuous chronological account of observed industrial activity. From initial construction of the Willow Run plant to reported high-frequency assembly output, German intelligence documentation maintained a factual register of events as they were reported at the time. Throughout these records, references to the scale and tempo of production were expressed through numerical data, schedules, and logistical indicators. The description of an assembly interval of approximately 63 minutes for a bomber consisting of roughly 1.5 million parts remained one of several data points consistently reproduced in reports. No internal commentary within these documents addressed the broader context beyond immediate operational relevance. The records preserved procedural descriptions, quantitative figures, and source citations in accordance with wartime intelligence reporting standards. These intelligence files, compiled under wartime conditions, reflected the continuous effort to observe and record industrial activity abroad using available means. The documentation concerning Ford Motor Company and the Willow Run facility formed part of this broader body of contemporaneous records maintained by German intelligence services during the final phase of the conflict. By the beginning of 1943 and continuing through subsequent months, German intelligence collection related to American industrial production followed established procedures defined by directives issued from Berlin. These directives emphasized continuous accumulation of data rather than episodic reporting. Intelligence officers were instructed to maintain chronological consistency, preserve original phrasing from source materials where possible, and separate verified figures from provisional estimates. Within this framework, information concerning the Ford Motor Company remained integrated into broader industrial reporting streams. Monthly intelligence bulletins compiled by economic sections of the Wehrmacht included standardized subsections devoted to aircraft manufacturing. Within these sections, Ford was listed alongside other American producers, with separate entries for plant location, workforce size, machinery inventory, and reported output. Willow Run appeared consistently as a distinct facility due to its single-purpose design and scale. Entries described it as a dedicated bomber production plant rather than a converted automobile factory, based on construction records and contemporary descriptions. German intelligence files from early 1943 recorded ongoing adjustments to the internal configuration of the Willow Run assembly line. Reports cited American technical articles describing resequencing of workstations to reduce transport distance between stages. Intelligence summaries included descriptions of conveyor realignment, overhead crane routing, and the introduction of mobile platforms to accommodate fuselage sections. These descriptions were transcribed as procedural observations. During this period, German analysts also noted the increasing reliance on pre-assembled modules delivered from external suppliers. Reports listed wing sections, tail assemblies, and control surface units arriving at Willow Run in near-complete form. Intelligence summaries recorded that these modules reduced the number of assembly operations required on-site. Data on delivery frequency and batch size were included where available. Documents from mid-1943 included references to American efforts to standardize tooling across multiple plants. German intelligence analysts recorded that Ford applied uniform jig designs and fixture specifications to ensure interchangeability of parts. These details were derived from American engineering conference proceedings and patent filings. Reports included drawings reproduced from publicly available sources. German intelligence documentation also tracked labor allocation within the Willow Run plant. Reports listed the number of workers assigned to specific assembly zones, including fuselage assembly, wing integration, systems installation, and final inspection. These figures were obtained from American labor statistics and factory staffing reports. Intelligence summaries presented these numbers as tables without accompanying narrative. In parallel, German intelligence monitored transportation infrastructure supporting Willow Run. Reports described rail sidings extending directly into the plant, allowing delivery of large components without intermediate handling. Intelligence analysts noted the presence of dedicated freight schedules servicing the facility. These observations were recorded based on rail company publications and shipping notices. Throughout 1943, German intelligence files included repeated references to the complexity of the B-24 bomber's construction. Reports enumerated categories of components, including structural elements, fasteners, electrical wiring segments, hydraulic fittings, and armament mounts. The figure of approximately 1.5 million individual parts continued to appear in these enumerations, sourced from American technical manuals. Intelligence summaries presented this figure consistently across multiple documents. By late summer 1943, intelligence reports documented a measurable reduction in assembly time per aircraft. Monthly production summaries listed average hours expended per bomber, showing a downward trend. German analysts compiled comparative charts showing changes over time. These charts were distributed within logistical planning sections. During this same period, reports referenced American initiatives to reduce material waste and rework. Intelligence summaries included descriptions of scrap recovery programs, standardized inspection protocols, and defect tracking systems. These descriptions were derived from American industrial management publications and factory newsletters obtained through neutral channels. German intelligence analysts also recorded information on training programs for new workers. Reports described induction courses, task-specific instruction, and supervision ratios. Intelligence summaries noted that training materials were standardized and frequently updated. These observations were recorded as factual descriptions of reported practices. By October 1943, intelligence reports increasingly referenced American press claims regarding production tempo at Willow Run. Articles published in American newspapers and trade journals described high-frequency output from the assembly line. German intelligence summaries extracted specific numerical claims, including the assertion that under optimal conditions a completed B-24 left the line approximately every 63 minutes. This figure was recorded verbatim, accompanied by source citations. Following the appearance of this figure, German intelligence agencies sought corroboration through indirect indicators. Reports compared claimed output rates with known shipment volumes, engine delivery schedules, and workforce size. Intelligence summaries included calculations showing consistency between reported assembly intervals and observed logistics data. These calculations were presented as arithmetic derivations without narrative interpretation. In addition to production tempo, German intelligence tracked maintenance and modification activities at Willow Run. Reports noted that some aircraft were routed to separate areas for post-assembly adjustments. Intelligence summaries described these areas as distinct from the main assembly line. These descriptions were based on American factory layout diagrams. German intelligence files also included references to safety and quality incidents reported in American publications. Reports listed dates and brief descriptions of assembly disruptions caused by equipment malfunction or material shortages. These incidents were recorded as isolated entries, with no additional analysis. Throughout late 1943 and into early 1944, German intelligence continued to compile serial production data. Monthly reports listed cumulative totals of aircraft produced at Willow Run. These totals were cross-referenced with American government announcements. Intelligence summaries included margin notes indicating discrepancies between sources, where present. German intelligence analysts also monitored financial data associated with aircraft production. Reports cited American congressional budget allocations and expenditure reports. Figures relating to cost per unit and total contract value were recorded. These financial entries were included alongside production statistics. During early 1944, intelligence reports noted incremental changes in aircraft configuration affecting assembly procedures. Modifications to armament placement, electronic equipment, and fuel systems were described in procedural terms. Intelligence summaries included notes on additional assembly steps required by these changes. German intelligence documentation from this period also recorded information on inspection regimes imposed by American authorities. Reports described inspection checkpoints along the assembly line, certification processes, and documentation requirements. These details were included to contextualize production timelines. As production stabilized, German intelligence reports increasingly emphasized routine data collection. Monthly summaries repeated key figures, including assembly interval, daily output, and workforce size. The 63-minute figure continued to appear as a recurring data point, cited from American sources without modification. In mid-1944, intelligence files recorded reports of peak output periods at Willow Run. These reports referenced American claims of record-setting production days. German intelligence summaries extracted numerical data and listed dates. These entries were presented as reported events. German intelligence also tracked the movement of completed aircraft from Willow Run to operational units. Reports listed ferry routes, staging airfields, and handover points. These details were obtained from American military publications and transport notices. Intelligence summaries correlated these movements with production schedules. Throughout this period, German intelligence maintained a formal tone and consistent structure in its reporting. Entries were organized chronologically, with source attribution where possible. No language indicating assessment, judgment, or prediction was included. By late 1944, intelligence reporting faced increasing limitations due to operational conditions. Nevertheless, existing reporting procedures continued to be applied. Documents from this period repeated earlier production figures, including the 63-minute assembly interval, as part of ongoing industrial monitoring. German intelligence analysts also catalogued American efforts to disseminate information about production methods. Reports listed instructional films, factory tours, and technical articles. These materials were archived as reference items. As the reporting period extended, German intelligence files accumulated a detailed chronological record of Ford Motor Company's aircraft production activities. The documentation preserved sequences of observed facts, procedural descriptions, and numerical data as reported at the time. Throughout these records, the scale of production was conveyed through enumeration of parts, labor hours, assembly intervals, and shipment volumes. The recurring reference to a bomber consisting of approximately 1.5 million parts and produced at intervals measured in minutes remained embedded within this body of contemporaneous documentation. The intelligence records reflected sustained attention to American industrial output using standardized reporting practices. The material concerning Willow Run and Ford Motor Company formed part of this ongoing record, maintained according to wartime intelligence conventions and preserved without interpretive commentary. In November 1943 and through the winter that follows, German reporting on American aircraft manufacture is assembled under standing instructions that require the separation of source material, translation notes, and compiled figures. The entry for Ford Motor Company remains active in multiple registries, including ABWare files maintained through remaining foreign collection channels and economic intelligence compilations circulated within Wehrmacht procurement offices. Each registry carries cross-references to Willow Run by plant name and by location descriptors used in translated American publications. Clerks log each incoming item with date of receipt, date of publication, language of origin, and an internal reliability code assigned according to the collecting office's scale. As new American trade journal issues and newspaper clippings arrive through neutral intermediaries, translation sections prepare German-language digests. The digests preserve numerical claims and technical descriptions with minimal alteration. Where a source states an assembly interval, the translator notes the unit, context, and whether the figure is presented as an average, a peak, or a stated objective. In several instances, American articles describe a 1 per hour rhythm and specify an interval of 63 minutes between aircraft leaving final assembly under specified conditions. The figure is copied into the digest and attached to a distribution sheet listing intended recipients. The distribution sheet includes Luftwaffe staff elements concerned with aircraft recognition and attrition estimates, Wehrmacht economic sections compiling enemy capacity tables, and internal offices responsible for comparing reported production with observed aircraft appearances in operational theaters. During the same period, the figure of approximately 1.5 million parts in AB-24 remains fixed in the German documentation set. The number appears in translated excerpts from American technical manuals and procurement summaries and is repeated in German-language compilations without modification. A standard annex used in several offices lists major categories of parts and assemblies, including airframe structure, fasteners, cabling, plumbing, instruments, hydraulic components, armament mounts, and furnishings. The annex is updated only when new American documentation gives alternate counts or revised breakdowns. No such alternate count is recorded in the files circulating during this interval. In December 1943, verification efforts are recorded in the form of parallel tabulations. Clerks and analysts compile rail and shipping indicators that are accessible through neutral commercial reporting. The indicators include freight movements of aluminum products and large crated assemblies to the region identified in German files as southeastern Michigan, the movement of engines and propeller units from known American engine plants to Ford receiving points, and the appearance of serial number blocks assigned to the B-24 in overseas lists. These are entered into tables that correlate dates, reported production claims, and observed logistical volumes. The tables show that the scale of material movement is compatible with high-frequency output, though the documentation uses the language of correlation and consistency rather than confirmation. At this stage, some reports include notations that the American sources emphasize the assembly line as a symbol of industrial method. The German documents record this as an observation about the structure of American communication, noting repeated phrases and repeated numerical claims across multiple publications. In the same files, a separate set of entries addresses the physical layout of the Willow Run plant. The entries list reported floor area, roof span, internal transport systems, and the existence of adjacent runways and flight test zones. Where the American sources provide diagrams, German clerks reproduce simplified layouts, marking the sequence of major assembly areas and the positions of inspection stations as described. The reproductions are filed as technical appendices. In early 1944, the Ford entry in the German Industrial Register is amended to include a list of principal subcontractors and a categorization of delivered assemblies. The list is based on American contractor announcements and trade journal references to outlying plants producing sections for final integration. German clerks create index cards for each named supplier, recording location, reported output, and relationship to Ford's bomber program. The index cards are stored in a file that is cross-referenced under Liberator and under general headings for aircraft subassembly networks. Throughout the first quarter of 1944, production claims continue to circulate with routine frequency. German summaries note that American sources distinguish between aircraft leaving final assembly and aircraft accepted after inspection and flight test. Where such distinctions appear, the German documents preserve them. A recurring entry indicates that the assembly interval refers to the completion point at the end of the line rather than the entire acceptance pipeline. Additional notes record that the aircraft still requires test flights and final adjustments before delivery to military authorities, and that these activities occupy separate spaces adjacent to the main production hall. Reports also accumulate details about the labor system supporting the claimed rhythm. American sources describe shift schedules and training arrangements, and German digests record the existence of multiple shifts operating continuously. Entries list approximate workforce size and mention categories of workers, including skilled trades and assembly labor. When American publications note the employment of women in production roles, the German reports record this as part of labor composition data. Several digests include references to on-site training facilities and standardized instruction modules, described in procedural terms. In parallel with industrial reporting, German offices maintain a separate registry for foreign intelligence personnel and networks. By 1944, internal memoranda in these registries record that collection in the United States is limited. The registries include references to earlier arrests and disruptions of German espionage activity in the United States, presented as administrative facts within security and counterintelligence notes. Where these memoranda touch the industrial collection problem, they do so by describing reduced direct observation capability and increased reliance on open sources and neutral channels. The memoranda contain no operational directives for large-scale direct infiltration of American war plants within the United States during this interval, and the surviving entries emphasize compilation, translation, and correlation. In the spring of 1944, updated Luftwaffe intelligence summaries incorporate the Ford and Willow Run figures into broader aircraft production tables. These tables are arranged by aircraft type and by manufacturer and list reported monthly output and estimated annual capacity. The Ford line item includes references to the assembly interval, often placed as a parenthetical note under the plant's estimated throughput. The tables are revised as new American sources arrive. Where discrepancies appear between reported output totals and calculated output based on the assembly interval, the German documents include both figures and note the discrepancy as a matter for further checking. The 63-minute figure remains present in these summaries, and the office practice is to cite it as a reported American claim rather than an internal German calculation. Translation notes sometimes preserve the surrounding American language indicating that the interval applies to peak production periods under specified conditions. German digests replicate qualifiers when they appear in the source. When a source does not provide qualifiers, the digest records the figure as stated. In more than one case, an intelligence clerk adds a marginal note that the figure is repeated across multiple American outlets, and the note is filed as an indicator of dissemination rather than proof. During mid-1944, additional documentation enters the German files concerning the parts flow required for continuous bomber production. American sources describe the sequencing of fuselage, wing, and tail integration. German technical digests record that major airframe sections arrive at the final plant as pre-assembled structures requiring alignment, riveting completion, and systems integration. The digests list the placement of wiring harnesses, hydraulic lines, and fuel systems, and record that these operations occur in defined line segments. Where American sources describe the use of jigs and fixtures to hold sections to tolerance, the German reports note this as part of the production method and include references to standardized gauge procedures. In the same period, German economic intelligence summaries also record raw material consumption indicators. Rail shipment counts, reported tonnages of aluminum products, and public statistics on American production of aluminum and magnesium alloys are compiled into annexes. These annexes are not limited to Ford but include Ford as one of the major consumers. In several annexes, Ford's Willow Run plant is listed under Aircraft Final Assembly and is linked to engine delivery schedules and propeller shipments. The annexes contain repeated notes that the movement of material to the plant is consistent with high continuous output, expressed as a statement of consistency rather than a conclusion. Throughout late summer and autumn 1944, German documentation continues in the same pattern. Clipping packets arrive from neutral countries containing American articles that again state the high tempo of Ford's bomber line. The 63-minute figure appears in new printings, and clerks add these clippings to the same file section that already contains earlier occurrences. Some offices maintain a running tally of occurrences of specific numerical claims. In this tally, the 63-minute interval is marked as recurring, and the tally includes date and source title. The purpose stated on the tally sheet is to track repetition and source diversity. As these materials circulate, German staff sections compile briefings for internal use. Briefing sheets include short paragraphs listing plant size, workforce, and reported output tempo, followed by bullet lists of source citations. The sheets avoid explanatory language and serve as reference materials for officers conducting capacity comparisons. In some cases, briefing sheets attach a numerical example. An interval of 63 minutes is converted to aircraft per day under continuous operation assumptions, with the arithmetic shown. The example is presented as a calculation derived from the reported interval and is labeled as a rate illustration. The illustration is then compared to monthly totals published by American agencies. The German documents record whether the illustration aligns with published totals, sometimes noting that maintenance, inspection, and operational disruptions would affect throughput, but these notes are written as general production constraints, not as evaluation. At the same time, German reports record the appearance of B-24 aircraft in operational use in multiple theaters. These records are assembled from Luftwaffe unit reports, aircraft recognition files, and observations of wreckage and forced landings. When serial numbers or production blocks are recorded from captured wreckage, the information is forwarded to technical intelligence sections. These sections compare the observed serial ranges to American procurement lists where available. The comparison is entered into files as a cross-reference that supports timing estimates. In several instances, the cross-references are attached to Willow Run production summaries, showing that aircraft from the relevant production blocks appear in operational use during the period consistent with reported plant output and delivery schedules. In late 1944, administrative changes within German intelligence structures and disruptions from military conditions affect the flow of external materials. Some offices record delays in receiving foreign publications and increased gaps in shipment manifests. Clerks note missing issues of specific journals and incomplete clipping packets. Despite these interruptions, the Ford file remains active and continues to be updated as materials arrive. During the winter of 1944 to 1945, the form of German reporting becomes more compact. Summaries shorten, and tables are reused with incremental updates rather than rewritten. The Ford entry continues to list Willow Run by location and includes a set of core figures, reported plant size, approximate workforce, parts count per aircraft, and the assembly interval claim. Alongside these, the summaries list the most recent published monthly totals for B-24 production, with a notation indicating whether the totals include other producers besides Ford. Where American sources distinguish between Ford-built Liberators and Liberators from all plants, the German digests preserve the distinction. Where sources blur the distinction, German notes sometimes add a caution that the figure may refer to total B-24 output rather than Ford-only output, and the caution is recorded as a technical note rather than an interpretation. During this period, German technical intelligence files include procedural descriptions of how such a tempo is maintained with a complex parts inventory. These descriptions are derived from American industrial management literature that emphasizes standardized part numbering, kitting, and station supply. German digests record that parts are delivered to workstations in pre-sorted sets, that line-side storage is limited, and that internal transport systems deliver parts in scheduled intervals. The digests also record the presence of inspection routines at multiple points and the use of standardized checklists. These entries are written in the same register as other technical descriptions and include no commentary beyond what is contained in source materials. Where American sources describe lessons from earlier production difficulties, German digests copy the timeline of reported corrections. Entries record that the plant's early output was below stated targets and that subsequent months show increased output after adjustments in tooling, station arrangement, and supply flows. These entries appear in chronological order, reflecting the structure of the source materials. Where American sources provide dates for changes in station sequence or for the introduction of new fixtures, German notes preserve those dates and file them under process change. In early 1945, German offices continue to maintain their capacity tables despite reduced inflow of new foreign publications. Some summaries indicate that the latest available American figures are several weeks old. The Ford entry continues to cite the 63-minute assembly interval as a reported claim. The figure is treated as part of the stable reference set for Willow Run, alongside the parts count and the plant's physical description. At the same time, internal German documentation records procedural efforts to preserve files. Registries note the relocation of certain archives and the consolidation of duplicate files to reduce storage and simplify retrieval. Where Ford-related files are consolidated, clerks record file numbers, transfer dates, and receiving offices. The content of the files remains unchanged in these entries, and the administrative record focuses on custody and location. Throughout this phase, references to shock or other emotional descriptors are not present in the formal German intelligence texts as filed. Where later handling notes or marginal annotations use emphatic markings such as underlining of key figures, these are recorded as clerical emphasis rather than narrative content. The main reporting remains numeric and procedural, listing reported rates, observed supply indicators, and cross-referenced serial blocks. In the same months, American publications continue to circulate through neutral channels in reduced volume. When they do arrive, they still contain accounts of the Willow Run line and its output tempo. German clerks add these to the existing clipping packets. The 63-minute interval appears again in some items, and the repeated occurrence is logged in the tally sheets. The parts count of approximately 1.5 million is repeated in technical contexts, often as a measure of complexity. German digests recorded in the same manner as earlier. By the spring of 1945, the Ford and Willow Run entries in the German industrial files remain structured as sequences of dated facts, construction references, plant layout descriptions, workforce figures, reported output totals, and the repeated reported assembly interval. The documentation continues to treat each incoming source as an item to be indexed, translated, and compared with other indicators. The core numerical claim that an aircraft leaves final assembly at intervals of approximately 63 minutes remains present as a reported figure within these files, set alongside the recurring part count figure and the procedural descriptions of assembly line segmentation and station supply. In March 1945, German offices that still circulate foreign industrial summaries continue to handle Ford and Willow Run entries as routine items within broader enemy production registers. Incoming material is uneven. Where foreign publications arrive, they are logged with receipt stamps and routed through translation desks that still maintain their earlier format. The Ford file remains indexed under aircraft production, and the Willow Run plant remains identified by location references taken from American sources and from earlier compiled plant descriptions. Clerks continue to preserve figures and units, and where an American source describes an assembly interval, the translation note retains the qualifier language if present. The recurring American claim that a completed B-24 leaves the end of the line at approximately 63-minute intervals remains present in digests and in the margin notes of capacity tables, recorded as a reported figure attributed to its sources. At the same time, German internal communications show that distribution lists are shortened. Some recipients on earlier lists are no longer reachable, and clerks adjust circulation according to current routing instructions. Duplicates of earlier forward summaries are recopied onto fewer sheets. In several offices, the forward entry is maintained as a single consolidated page updated by handwritten annotations rather than by issuing full retyped briefs. These annotations add dates of the latest American citations and the latest available monthly totals. Where American sources distinguish forward-built B-24 totals from overall B-24 totals, the distinction remains carried forward as a note beside the figures. Where the sources do not distinguish, the German file includes a short caution line that the number may refer to all producers, recorded as a technical note tied to source ambiguity. Technical appendices attached to the forward file continue to include a parts enumeration for the aircraft. The approximate figure of 1.5 million parts remains on the primary reference sheet, presented as an extracted number from American technical documentation. The sheet contains a list of part categories and assembly groupings, and a separate line identifies that the figure is used in several American descriptions of the bomber's complexity. When new American material repeats the number, it is marked as a repeated occurrence rather than as a new figure. The reference sheet is used by clerks to ensure consistency of transcription in future digests. During this same period, German staff sections compiling enemy capacity tables continue to use the Willow Run entry in broader aircraft production tables arranged by type and by manufacturer. The tables retain columns for plant, workforce estimate, reported monthly output, and reported peak assembly interval where such a figure is available. The Willow Run row shows an interval value with a note indicating it is quoted from American industrial publications. Where clerks produce rate illustrations, they continue to perform simple arithmetic conversions from minutes per aircraft to aircraft per day under continuous operation assumptions, and they mark these conversions as illustrative calculations rather than as confirmed output. These calculations remain attached as appendices and are not incorporated into the primary output totals unless a source provides direct monthly numbers. As March progresses, German internal memoranda record increasing difficulty in acquiring current foreign publications. Several registries include notations that the most recent issues of specific American trade journals have not arrived through usual neutral channels. Clipping packets are received irregularly, with gaps in dates. Clerks document missing intervals and annotate files with "no new material received" entries. Despite this, the forward file is maintained as active. Where no new sources arrive, the last verified citation for the 63-minute interval remains in place, and the file's date line reflects the most recent confirmed source receipt. Within technical intelligence sections that handle aircraft identification and captured material, records continue to be compiled from Luftwaffe unit reports and from battlefield observations. These records contain references to B-24 aircraft encountered and, where possible, serial number blocks taken from wreckage markings. When such serial ranges are recorded, they are forwarded to clerks who maintain serial correlation tables. The tables list observed serial numbers, approximate dates of observation, and cross-references to published American procurement lists where available. In some cases, serial blocks associated with forward production are flagged with an F notation based on earlier compiled information. These flags are recorded as clerical identifiers used within the file system. The serial correlation tables remain attached to industrial production summaries as an additional reference. In April 1945, administrative notes within German intelligence offices show that file security procedures become more prominent. Registries record orders to consolidate, relocate, or reduce archives according to local directives. The implementation varies by office. Some clerks assemble file bundles into sealed containers and mark them with inventory lists. Inventory lists include file titles, internal reference numbers, and approximate page counts. The Ford Motor Company file appears on several inventories under industrial intelligence headings. Where it appears, the inventory list describes it by company name and by subject, such as aircraft production and Willow Run plant, and it notes whether technical appendices are included. In offices where relocation is attempted, clerks record dates and destinations in administrative logs. These logs are procedural and list transport arrangements, responsible personnel, and custody signatures. In some cases, clerks note that transport is incomplete or that certain file sections are retained due to lack of containers or transport capacity. Where the Ford file is split, the log records which portions move and which remain, such as clipping packet retained or tables transferred. These entries do not describe content beyond file identification and custody. In the same period, some German offices continue to receive foreign industrial news through remaining neutral conduits. When these items arrive, they are processed with reduced staffing. Translation notes become shorter, often consisting of extracted numbers and brief procedural descriptors. If an item again reports Ford's assembly interval or plant capacity, the figures are copied into the consolidated Ford page and the clipping is appended. Repetition counts on the tally sheets are updated where those sheets are still maintained. The tally sheet entries list date, source title, and the repeated figure. The 63-minute claim, where it appears, is recorded as another occurrence. As April continues, German internal communications show that some intelligence sections shift from external collection to internal file control and disposition. Administrative directives are logged with time and date stamps. Clerks acknowledge receipt and record actions taken. Where directives concern industrial intelligence files, they list categories rather than specific companies, but custodians sometimes note key files by name in local notes. The Ford file is included among the industrial files that remain identifiable due to its established index position and the frequency with which it has been cited in earlier briefings. In late April 1945, some German intelligence offices are evacuated or cease routine operations. In those circumstances, clerks' logs show abrupt interruptions in file updating. Entries record last actions such as file sealed, file moved, or no further distribution. Where files are left in place, administrative notes sometimes indicate storage location within an office building or archive room, such as cabinet number or shelf. These notes are written in the same procedural manner as earlier registry entries. During this same time, Allied forces advance into areas containing German administrative and intelligence facilities. German registries that are not evacuated remain in buildings that become accessible to Allied personnel. Where Allied forces enter such facilities, German clerical notes do not record subsequent handling unless a clerk remains present to make entries. In locations where clerks continue logging, they record that foreign personnel have arrived and that office access has changed. These entries remain factual and limited to immediate observations. In May 1945, as German administrative structures fragment, some German intelligence files are captured intact by Allied units. Captured file handling procedures used by Allied forces include cataloging, boxing, and transport to collection points. Where these procedures are documented in contemporaneous Allied paperwork, they include file titles, originating offices, and brief subject descriptions. Industrial intelligence files are typically grouped by subject and origin. A file labeled for Ford Motor Company or for Willow Run appears among such captured materials where it has been preserved and not destroyed during earlier consolidation. Within captured German industrial intelligence materials, the Ford and Willow Run entries remain as they were compiled, translated clippings, tables of reported output, technical appendices, and index cards for suppliers. The entries that cite an assembly interval of approximately 63 minutes remain present where previously filed. The parts count reference of approximately 1.5 million remains on technical reference sheets and in repeated digests. The documents retain their original stamps, distribution lists, and internal reference numbers. Marginal annotations, underlines, and tally marks remain as physical marks on the papers. These marks function as clerical emphasis and filing aids within the documents and do not change the recorded figures. Where Allied document exploitation teams begin sorting captured materials, their initial work consists of identifying topics relevant to immediate operational needs. Industrial intelligence files are set aside for evaluation of enemy knowledge, collection methods, and internal distribution structures. In this process, the FORD file is treated as a foreign industrial observation file, containing open source and neutral channel material compiled into a German format. Allied catalog entries, where produced, include the company name and subject line. These catalog entries are administrative descriptions and do not alter the German document's content. In parallel, Allied intelligence work concerning American industrial production continues within the United States through official channels, and Ford's Willow Run output remains recorded by American agencies in their own production reports. Within the American system, plant output is documented through acceptance records, delivery schedules, and inspection certifications. These records are maintained by the relevant American authorities and contractors in accordance with wartime reporting requirements. Where American documentation continues to repeat the 63-minute claim in public-facing materials, it remains framed as a reported achievement or stated capability in the language of the issuing source. Where American internal reports focus on acceptance and delivery, they list totals by date and by production lot. The distinction between public claims and administrative acceptance records remains present within the documentation streams as they are kept. As May progresses, remaining German internal file updates largely cease. Where a Ford entry exists in a German registry, it is no longer being refreshed with new foreign publications at a regular interval. The last entered citations and the last logged receipt dates remain as final entries in those local files. Administrative records that continue to be written focus on custody, relocation attempts, and office status rather than on new industrial content. Where German intelligence personnel are taken into custody and questioned during this period, procedural records of questioning focus on organizational structure, collection methods, and file locations. When industrial intelligence is addressed, questions concern sources used and routes by which foreign publications were obtained. Answers recorded in contemporaneous notes describe reliance on open publications, neutral intermediaries, and commercial data where direct access is limited. Where Ford and Willow Run appear in these records, they do so as an example of a high-priority American production subject that is tracked through open sources and translated materials. The questioning notes, where preserved, list file titles and may reference repeated numerical claims that were prominent in the files. In these notes, the 63-minute interval may be mentioned as an example of an extracted figure that appeared repeatedly in American publications and was entered into German summaries as reported data. Within the captured German documents themselves, the chronology remains the primary structure. Early entries described the authorization and construction of a dedicated plant near Ypsilanti, Michigan. Subsequent entries describe tooling and workforce recruitment. Later entries describe modular supply and assembly line segmentation, and recurring entries list reported output tempo and the asserted assembly interval. The documents include tables correlating serial blocks, shipment indicators, and reported output totals. They include technical descriptions of station work, inspection points, and parts delivery to the line. The documents preserve the figure of approximately 1.5 million parts per aircraft and the repeated reported assembly interval of approximately 63 minutes between aircraft leaving the final assembly point under specified conditions. The documents retain the language of their sources and the procedural tone of their compilers. At the point when German administrative activity is collapsing, the Ford and Willow Run file content remains a compiled record of foreign industrial reporting as collected during the war. The file contains no concluding entries that revise the earlier figures, no new verified alternative assembly intervals, and no internal German measurement taken from direct observation within the plant. The final visible actions in the German records are clerical: last receipt stamps, last distribution marks, last custody notes, and, where present, last inventory lines that list the file among other industrial intelligence holdings. The paper trail ends where office activity ends, leaving the compiled figures and procedural descriptions as they are recorded in the documents at that time.